Today I'm going to be breaking down Party No They Stop by Adekunle Gold featuring Xeno Liske, where I'm going to be talking you through the various elements of the track as we go through it. Before we go ahead and get into the video though, if you have an artist or a track that you would like me to check out, pop it in the comments. Also, if you like new music and you want to hear more of it, go ahead, check out my main channel, Pure Urban Music. Link in the description below. 100% of the royalties do go directly back to the artist. I don't take a penny of it, and that's the way I want it to stay. So if you want to get involved and you want to show your support, go ahead and check that out. Let's get it.
I'm not moved by what I see.
Okay, right. So let's kick things off here, right? That intro's absolutely banging, right? We've got these chords that come in, right? Some keys. We've got this snare that's creating a nice rhythm and a bit of a pacey beat. We get a glimpse of a bass line in there as well. But what really stands out to me is the vocals, right? We've got some female vocals in there. And what they do is they kind of add this effect onto those vocals so that they kind of start out where they're buried quite deep into the mix. But as we go through it, it begins to expand out until they're actually at the forefront of the track. We then get this transition where we get sort of like a bit of a drum roll and then a hit. And then we get into the opening verse. So look, as an intro, right, it's absolutely banging. It's got all of the elements in there, right? Essentially all of the ingredients that tells you exactly what you're going to get from this song. It literally hands it to you on a plate. I'm going to take it back just one or two, just see if you can pick up on some of those elements, just so that we can kind of start afresh from the first verse. Drum roll.
I'm not moved by what I see. I know who I be. I just want my peace, make money day. I go get everything I need in my own timing. Koni kojami, koni dide. So many people deny. Oluwa don't go sign. Can't believe this my life.
Okay, right. So pay attention to what they're doing here or how they begin to build this track out, right? So as I said, you know, we go from the intro, we get that transition with the drum roll and a slight hit, and then we're into the verse, right? Now, when we first get into the verse, you notice that there's no bass line in it at all, right? It's just we've got a nice soft kick drum, we've got that snare, we've got some shakers, so some core percussive elements in there, and clearly we've got the keys in there as well, right? But then what happens is in the second part of the verse, right, the bass then hits. And that's really nice because then what that does is gives us some warmth and some depth to the track. Another thing to pay attention to here is what they're doing to the vocals, especially in that opening part where there's no bass, right? And what you'll notice is at the tail end of the vocals, they're extending those using either sort of like an echo or a reverb. Right? Now, that actually does serve a purpose beyond just sounding nice, right? Or kind of providing a bit of ear candy. Now, if you pay attention, what would happen is if they didn't extend those vocals, right? And they just cut them off where they essentially would or do end, right? Without that effect, what you'd actually have is this gap in the instrumental between when one phrase ends and the next one begins, and it just wouldn't sound right. So rather than piling in a whole bunch of other instruments or trying to add in risers and all this sort of stuff, what they simply do is they just extend that vocal to fill that gap nicely. So absolutely brilliant production technique in terms of how they're building the track out, but also how they're using or extending the back end of vocals to kind of fill a void rather than throwing extra instruments in there. Absolutely banging.
So many people deny. Oluwa don't go sign. Can't believe this my life. Everything come align. They look at me
Harmonies
so surprised. Shamadelo don't buy. I know it's hurting your pride. Believe me, I don't mind. Party no they stop when we pop. Yeah, we have plenty spending like it's nothing. Party no they stop when we pop. Yeah, we have plenty spending like it's nothing.
Okay, right. So talking about the chorus here. So what happens before we actually get into the chorus, right, is they give us a real simple transition, right? And this is a prime example of how tracks don't have to get complicated in order to transition nicely. So to get us out of the first verse and into the chorus, right, they do two things. They strip the beat out, right, and obviously just leaving some core instruments in there. But also what we get is we get a little riff, right, of the bass and I think what is an additional guitar, right? And that simple cut and adding that riff in, right, which is not particularly hard, right, not only brings emphasis to those final phrases, but it very simply allows the listener to know that a change is going to happen. But thirdly, it just allows a simple and smooth transition into the chorus without any real complexity. When we get into the chorus, we then get the addition of kind of two extra instruments. So we get what sounds like a flute, and it's just like plays this kind of rhythm, right? And then we also get an awesome synth that comes in. And what they do with the synth, right, which again is just really clever, is instead of when they kind of press down and it plays instantly, what they do is they take that synth, and it's almost like a Formula One car. You know how it sort of like comes, like as it's coming up, it comes from the back, it passes through, and then it fades out. That's what happens with the synth. You listen to the synth, it comes from the back, it hits its peak in the middle, and then it fades out nicely. And then the final touch here is, it's almost like another transition in itself, right? Or another indicator of change is they're letting you know that Xeno Liske is about to come in, right? Because what he's doing here is he's just providing some ad-libs, right? Or just kind of riffing. I mean, they're more like ad-libs, right? And what that's letting you know is that very soon, right, he's going to come in and he's going to drop his verse. I'm going to take it back just a few, not too far, but just listen to some of those elements.
When we pop, yeah, we have plenty spending like it's nothing.
Synth. There.
When we pop, yeah, we have plenty spending like it's nothing.
There's those ad-libs.
Say me I know they war free, cause Oluwa don't consign me. I know they put my foot, no consign me. Kinda slow, but I'm always on timing. Say my eyes don't see many things, see me Ogbadura for time. If you see the hate, you need therapy. Good vibes, no bad energy, yo. Yeah. Aje, tibaja de ton, ayan waja. Tibati fe mule na banga. Me where I don't, I on paraga. I go get time for wala.
Okay, right. So again, right, just pay attention to a couple of things that happen here. So firstly, when Xeno Liske comes in, the first thing that stands out to me is the rhythm of his vocals. Normally, I would be like, okay, right, this is absolutely needed within the track because we need some change and we need some shifting. And a good way to do that, again, without trying to make the instrumental too complex, is just to kind of change the rhythm in vocals. But actually, we don't really need it in this track because there's so much happening and shifting and changing all of the time. It really wouldn't make a difference whether he come with the same rhythm as what we got in the first verse or whether he didn't. But the fact that he did is actually just a cherry on top with, you know, with everything really. And then what happens is kind of in terms of the arrangement or the structure of the instrumental, right, is very similar to what we get in the first part. So when he comes in, there's no bass. We've just got those core drums and the instruments. We then get into the latter part of the verse and the bass comes in. But what we get this time, which is actually different to what we had the first time, is we've now got this synth which is playing this kind of pacey melody over the top. Again, I'll take it back and you can listen to those elements.
Hear
that synth there?
Me where I don't, I on paraga. I go get time for wala. I don't get fine like Rihanna. Spend it like a big Cubana. Live active for Tony. Montana. Original not made in China.
Nice cut there.
They stop when we pop. Yeah, we have plenty spending. Like it's nothing. Party no they stop when we pop. Yeah, we have plenty spending. Like it's nothing.
Right, listen to what they're doing here. And what a brilliant decision, right? Mate, it's just blind. Okay, so what happens, right? We get Xeno Liske's verse, right? We've already discussed what happens instrumentally and vocally with that, right? We then get that kind of beat cut, again, similar to what we had in the first verse, and we enter the chorus. Right now, we know what the chorus sounds like because we've already had it in the first part of the song. But to extend that, right, and to ensure it doesn't get too repetitive, right, to avoid people maybe getting a little bit bored, what do? They bring back in the female vocals, right? So we still get to enjoy that kind of feel and vibe of the chorus that we love, but we get to do it with a change where they bring in the female vocals. It's absolutely banging. Let's listen to the whole piece. Layered vocals. I'm sorry, man. Those layered vocals are absolutely they're just stunning towards the end of that, right? They're being harmonized slightly. We've got a higher range vocal up here. We've got a deeper vocal down here. Then they cut it and we really get to hear the full effect of those stacked vocals, right? Let me just take that back a bit. Right, coming up. Here it is. Like it's nothing. Party no they stop when we pop. Yeah, we are plenty spending. Like it's nothing. Okay, so some final thoughts on the track. So overall, I really liked the whole vibe and feel of that track, man. I was proper in it. You could probably tell by the reaction and the awkward movement of my body, right? But I really enjoyed it, right? I love the intro. I like, you know, it's not all the time, right, that songs in an intro will pretty much give you everything that you're going to get, at least in terms of core instruments, right? They normally kind of, you know, intros are normally stripped back quite a bit, but this, we had everything. We had the chords, we had the bass, we had female vocals, we had the snare that was coming in the background, and we had that effect that was being put on the female vocal to kind of bury it or kick it off, where it's buried deep in the mix to then where it begins to expand. So absolutely banging feel and vibe, and absolutely loved the intro. The second thing that I really liked about this was how they left room within the track to build on it. So I said it in the video in Adekunle's verse and also Xeno Liske's verse. You notice that when it kicks off, there's no bass in there, right? And they do that purposely so that as they go through, they can add in these elements without the track becoming too kind of cluttered with too many instruments or risking that it becomes or starts to sound overproduced. I really like what they did with the vocals on both segments of that. So firstly, without the bass, where they're extending the back end or the tail end of the vocals to fill that void between one phrase and the next, but also then when the bass does drop, how they begin to stack and layer those vocals just to kind of help pad that out and make that sound more richer and fuller. The third and final thing for me is how they extended or kind of executed that back end chorus, right? So we had already had two choruses by that point, And clearly within their mind, they wanted to extend that chorus, but they were thinking, well, I mean, this is what I imagine they're thinking. Okay, well, we don't just want to just repeat the chorus because it's just going to get too much. So I tell you what we'll do. Let's take the female vocals that we had at the start and we'll throw them in, and that will extend the chorus nicely, and that will give us room within the arrangement to then layer over the top with Adekunle and Xeno Liske's vocals just kind of riffing, ad-libbing, freestyling, whatever it is that you want to call it, right? And it's a real nice touch. They added some extra rolls in there as well, like drum rolls and hits, which just kind of added to the kind of impact that was supposed to have, and it was just really well executed. Okay, that's it from me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and I will see you in the next one.